When the communists rose to power in Russia in 1917, they brought with them several decades of experience in clandestinity and none in normal politics, the democratic legality prevailing in the major European countries and America. The immediate consequence was that they carried the techniques and habits of underground struggle into government. Revolutionary government, in this context, came to mean government by clandestine means, secrecy, betrayal, deception, perfidy. The underground fighter is one who permits himself everything, who owes no allegiance to any external legal or moral order, inventing his own rules freely according to the interests and contingencies of the fight for power. What distinguished the nascent Soviet power was less the use of violence than the deliberate, calculated nature of its brutality. Lenin and Dzerzhinsky, head of the secret police, were convinced that violence worked chiefly through its psychological impact, the terror it instilled in the masses. For this reason, they adopted methods of cruelty that, to civilized public opinion, were simply unimaginable. Impalement of prisoners was one such method. Impalements are a strange rarity in Western history. The Romanian warrior Count Vlad, mythologized as Dracula, used it against invading Turks who, being habitual practitioners of the method themselves, feared it above all else. His view was, impale or be impaled. The Soviet refinement was that the candidates for impalement were not chosen from among potential impalers, but from among priests and monks, to scandalize the faithful and make them lose faith in religion, following Lenin's goal to extirpate Christianity from the face of the earth. Socialist innovations in torture also defy the imagination of a normal person. Skinning prisoners alive, locking them in tombs with decomposing corpses, sliding them slowly down a plank into a furnace, placing a bottomless cage with a rat inside on their belly, then heating the rat's rear with a candle flame so that, trapped with no escape, it gnaws through the victim's body. These are just some of the processes documented by an investigative commission from the Allied countries. Those interested in these facts may consult A People's Tragedy. The Russian Revolution 1891 to 1924, London, Jonathan Cape, 1996, by Orlando Figes, one of the best studies on the period, as well as the classic testimony of Sergei P. Melganov, The Red Terror in Russia, London, J.M. Dent, 1925. Naturally, I will be accused of bad taste for recalling this part of history, well known but deliberately forgotten. But deliberate forgetting, no matter what polite justification is given for it, is part of the crime. It is the repression that consolidates neurosis and eternalizes the repetition of symptoms. To see how this works, just notice how, ever since, the socialists themselves have made tremendous publicity noise about allegations of torture, true or false, against dictatorships that, in terms of brutality, do not hold a candle to the Leninist tradition. No one wields greater rhetorical power and accusation than the criminal who hides his own guilt. He knows that revealing his crimes would make him loathsome, so he is so skilled at painting an odious image of his adversaries. The model of his discourse is stamped on his soul. This explains why it is primarily the local supporters and servants of the Cuban regime who publicly display the most pathetic outrage when speaking about the violence of our military regime. All torture is odious, but there is no evidence that our dictatorship systematically resorted to mutilations of prisoners, whereas the exiled Cubans' TV Marti channel weekly exhibits an endless procession of severed fingers, torn off ears, and gouged eyes, attesting to the continuity of Leninism in Havana's political prisons. It is precisely the repressed awareness of their moral complicity in such crimes that fuels these people, by the well-known mechanism of projective accusation, with the fiery eloquence by which they illuminate before the masses the macabre splendor of incomparably lesser crimes. Similarly, the worldwide wave of protests surrounding the death of Orlando Letelier, assassinated in exile by agents of the Chilean dictatorship, served to completely erase from popular memory the fact that the practice of ordering the killing of opponents abroad was a Lenin invention, an invention that claimed several hundred victims in Paris and London in the revolution's first decade, and whose use extended demonstrably at least until the 1950s, with the murder of General Walter Krivitsky in a Washington hotel. None of these episodes received anywhere near the media attention given to the Letelier case. How is it possible that a single homicide arouses more outrage than hundreds of others? The explanation lies in the fact that the indignation of the normal human being against crime and violence is mixed with a sadness that inclines more towards silence than to great public outpourings of tears. It can never compete, in media theatrics, with the feigned emotions of sociopaths. It was precisely the inseparable synthesis of cruelty and pretense, the blend of barbarism and cerebral calculation, of covert action and hysterical publicity, that characterized the first socialist government of Russia, later faithfully imitated by all subsequent revolutionary socialisms, from Asia to Latin America. What socialism brought to the world was a novel style of political action, radically different from anything Western civilization had known until then. The impact of this novelty opened, for the 20th century man, an abyss of opportunities for moral and spiritual degradation that surpassed, in horror and cruelty, anything humanity before could imagine. The history of this century, the bloodiest in human history, would be inexplicable without this precedent set by the revolutionary who ascends to government and carries with him, into the state apparatus, the spirit of clandestinity.